Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Lasecki, for today's webinar. Today is Thursday, May 1st, 2019, and our topic today is preparing forms for your NSF ATE proposal. This webinar is brought to you by Mentor Connect with support from the National Science Foundation. This webinar is hosted by ATE Central. ATE Central is the information hub for the ATE community. You can find out more about the services they offer, including all of the webinars they host, and other resources for the ATE program at atecentral.net. Let's go right ahead to our introductions for today's event. But before we do that, let me remind you that the webinar is being recorded and you'll automatically receive a link to the recording. And one more note, please use the chat window. You can see it in the upper right of your screen. Plenty of opportunities to ask questions today of our expert panelists, so take advantage of that today. And now let's turn to our presenters. I'd like to welcome Elaine Kraft. She's the Principal Investigator of Mentor Connect. Elaine, welcome to today's webinar. Say hello to everyone, and please introduce your co-presenters.
Thank you, Mike, and hello, everyone. As Mike said, I am Elaine Kraft, and it is my privilege and pleasure to be the Principal Investigator for the Mentor Connect project. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is designed to guide you through the preparation of forms associated with submission of an NSF grant proposal. While most of these forms are not unique to the NSF ATE program, some documents and instructions for how you should complete the forms are specific to ATE. Our goal is to help you prepare competitive grant proposals and avoid common mistakes as you prepare and submit your proposal. This is important because errors in submitting the required information as specified can result in having your proposal returned without review. The Mentor Connect team will provide guidance for completing the required forms, but please be reminded that we are not speaking on behalf of the National Science Foundation. The opinions we express are our own. We will share information from NSF publications as well as from our own experience. Joining me today are co-principal investigators Ellen Haas and Emery DeWitt. Emery also serves as the Mentor Connect project manager. Mentor Connect team members have many years of experience in completing the forms that we will be discussing with you today. Now, using that chat box that Mike pointed out to you, let us know how many people are in the room with you viewing this webinar today. This will help us to determine our total audience for today, which helps with our NSF reporting. Great, everybody's finding the chat box. That's terrific. And a few of you are watching in pairs or teams. That's excellent. Thank you so much for participating in that question. Now, I would like to give you an overview of what we will be discussing today. We will be covering forms and related documents that are part of all NSF ATE proposals. You can see from this diagram that the heart of any proposal is the project description. Some people refer to this as the narrative, and we may use both terms during today's presentation. The project summary is the elevator speech for your project. In other words, it is a short one-page overview of your project that very quickly tells somebody what it is that you plan to do. Ellen will share some information about these two project components later in the webinar, but they are really not our emphasis today. Also, there are two other important proposal documents that we will not be discussing today: budget forms and budget justification. These particularly critical components of proposal preparation were covered in a separate webinar that we provided earlier this year. The budget and budget justification webinar recording and a tutorial derived from the webinar are available on the Mentor Connect website. Emory will tell you more about how to access MentorConnect resources later in this program. So, what are we discussing today? The cover sheet, project data form, biographical sketches, current and pending support forms, facilities and other resources form, references cited, data management plan, list of collaborators, and supplemental documents, which are somewhat like appendices to a proposal. Each item serves a specific purpose. We will walk you through each one to help you understand what is required. Our desire is to help you better understand these forms and how to avoid some errors frequently seen by program officers and reviewers. The bottom line is that a careful preparation of forms contributes to a proposal that is more competitive overall. I thought an example might help you understand why forms are not a trivial part of your grant proposal. The numbers in this example, are from a typical project proposal that was submitted to the NSF ATE program several years ago. The full proposal was 86 pages long. Of the 86 pages, the project description or narrative filled 15 pages, which is the maximum allowable length for this component of an ATE proposal. The project summary is restricted to 1 page. Budget forms for a 3-year project will take up 4 pages, which is a budget for each year and a cumulative budget page for the entire proposal. The budget justification for this project filled 5 pages. You now have 3 pages. You have now 5 pages to do budget justifications, but you get the idea. So far, we've accounted for only 23 pages of the proposal. Forms and supplementary documents made up the remaining 63 pages, or 73% of the proposal used in this example. So as you can see, the majority of the overall proposal is actually made up of forms and supplementary documents. This is no small amount of work, so get started on these forms right away. You'll hear us say that a lot this afternoon. They take some time and need to be prepared thoughtfully. Now, we want to ask you a question. So, Mike, if you'll launch the poll for me. So we want to know, are you now or have you been a MentorConnect participant? That means you're either a mentor, a faculty member, or other college personnel. We are always delighted to have so many of our MentorConnect participants in our audience, and we give you a special welcome today. We're also excited to and are delighted to extend a special welcome to other participants. If you are not already working directly with MentorConnect to learn about grant writing and how to increase the competitiveness of your NSF ATE proposal, we encourage you to investigate this opportunity. Now, Mike, you can close this poll, and I'm going to turn it over to Emory.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where everyone is. I will begin with 2 resources that you should refer to over and over again. I think I am still ahead of there. There I am. Okay. 2 resources you should refer to over and over again are the Advanced Technological Education Program Solicitation and the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, known by the acronym PAPPG, as you see here on the screen. While the PAPPG covers everything you need to know to submit a proposal and manage a project at any division at the National Science Foundation, the ATE solicitation includes information that's critical to ensuring that you meet all of the requirements that are specific to the ATE program. So you need to read the solicitation. You will hear that over and over as well. We recommend that you print out and read the entire ATE solicitation and have it handy while you prepare your proposal. This advice applies to faculty who serve as principal investigators as well as to the grant writers. Solicitation documents are updated regularly. The ATE solicitation is usually published to cover 3 years, and the submission deadline for each year is specified. So before you think about starting your forms in Fastlane, we suggest you all meet as a team and think about the following. Who is your SRO, your Sponsored Research Officer? This person will be the only one who can register your institution with Fastlane and get your Fastlane ID. Note, your Fastlane ID is the same ID you use to access research.gov, another NSF website. This is not grants.gov. The SRO will also register all of the principal investigators, co-principal investigators, and the senior personnel. You can upload grant proposal content or park that information in Fastlane, delete it, and upload different components or information up until the proposal is finally submitted to NSF. So there's no reason not to start this process immediately. The principal investigator and the SRO should cross-check and sign off for completeness before any submission. So, since you have editing flexibility and there are so many forms to complete, you should get started with those forms sooner than later. So I want to quickly draw your attention to the light bulb icon that you see throughout the webinar. These are tips and tricks from the MentorConnect team. These reminders will help you avoid errors and should make the process easier. So now we're going to get back to the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, which is the PAPPG, a document NSF publishes annually. Always make certain that you are referring to the most current PAPPG. As you can see on the screen, there are a variety of ways to navigate through the document with HTML links available at nsf.gov. The PAPPG includes a proposal preparation section with information that is critical, such as allowable font sizes, margins, and specific requirements for proposal components. The PAPPG is also available on the nsf.gov website in the PDF form like you see here. If you sign up online to receive publications from NSF, then you will begin receiving links to important NSF documents as new ones are published. The PAPPG, for example, is updated once a year and typically sent out in November or December with a January active date. So here's some of the forms in Fastlane, sort of a step-by-step. Fastlane is the online system that works most efficiently for inputting proposal information. In another year or so, research.gov will become the primary input system for all grant proposal submissions. Note that research.gov is an NSF website. Don't confuse this with grants.gov. There are many good reasons for using Fastlane instead of grants.gov while submitting grant proposals to the NSF. Data and information entered into the online system will look quite different in a hard copy. We will use some screenshots to show you where to input information and how forms look once completed. You will be clicking the Go button to each form. We will go through each of those forms individually. There are a few items that you will not need to worry about when completing these forms. The mentoring plan, the deviation authorization, and suggested reviewers are not applicable to the AT proposals. Notice that you can view the latest updated saved information signified by date. NSF has implemented a new automated compliance check function. This will help ensure that proposal requirements are met prior to submission. Your proposal will not be accepted if the required forms are not completed as specified. A 5-page document about the compliance check function is available on the nsf.gov website in MentorConnect Resource Library. The cover sheet is an important document as well. As you can see our light bulb there. Here are some tips for completing that cover sheet. The cover sheet provides NSF with a concise summary of all of the administrative data about the proposal. Included is a requirement for college certification that all statements in the proposal are true and that they will follow the appropriate federal grant regulations. A question and checkbox completed by the SRO for the college constitutes an electronic signature on behalf of the institution, so no actual or electronic signature is signed or inserted. So note, the SRO must get all the way to the bottom of the cover sheet section and end of the page to reach that authorization question. Only the SRO has the permission, which is granted by the college and SEDPN Advanced and Fastlane, to check off on the certification authorization in the online system. There is no grace period for doing this. If this certification isn't complete when the proposal is submitted prior to the deadline, the proposal will be returned without review. So here is a sample of the cover sheet. At this time, the majority of ATE proposals, including the small grants for institutions new to ATE, will be submitted in the ATE projects track. In the for consideration, which I'm going to point to with my green arrow, hopefully, right there, that's noted as that you are for consideration by NSF box and select due or ATE projects. Also new to ATE or any other ATE project should be noted as research or other than rapid or eager, as you see down at the bottom. If in doubt, call Mentor Connect, ask your mentor, or call an NSF program officer. Getting your proposal in the right category for review is very important. Projects invariably take longer than you think they will. It's a good idea to request the maximum time allowed for the type of grant you are requesting, typically 36 months, 3 years. Note that the duration of the grant you are requesting needs to be in months. It should be in the whole year equivalents, like 24 months for 2 years, 36 months for 3 years. So under proposal duration, you will likely place 36 months. The amount requested is an important component in helping make sure your proposal is sent to the appropriate panel. For example, small grants are up to $300,000 or less, so indicate that in your requested amount. Important, indirect cost must be included within the budget maximum for the type of proposal you are seeking. If you request more than $300,000, your proposal will be placed in the larger, more competitive general pool of ATE project proposals for review, and this will reduce your chances of funding by as much as 40 to 50%. A note about the proposal number. This is at the top here. Your proposal number becomes your grant number if the proposal is funded. Knowing your proposal and grant number is very helpful at every stage. This is how you locate your proposal when you work in Fastlane. This is also how you identify your proposal when communicating with program officers. We collect these proposal numbers from participants in each Mentor Connect cohort to help us track the status of the proposal awards. Here's the note about the start date. NSF is most likely to set your start for the project on the date you have selected. Consider what will work with your business office and your work plan. Most proposals have start dates between June 1 and September 1. Consider the time it will take to get faculty release time worked out and when you want it to start. For example, if you receive your award notification in May and you selected a start date of September 1, you will have all summer to get this all worked out. Choosing a mid-semester start date will make it difficult or impossible to get people started working with grant support. Don't choose a date that's too early in the calendar. This could result in a receipt of your award notice on or after your requested start date, and that puts you behind from day one. Don't expect to be able to change this start date once set by NSF in your award. Some other notes on the screen, you will notice that there are several check boxes as you submit to the ATE track. The example here shows the appropriate selections. First-time investigators should indicate this by selecting the beginning investigator. You don't insert information directly into the cover sheet. You submit information elsewhere, and then Fastlane will populate the cover sheet. The place to provide information for the cover sheet isn't always obvious, so be diligent about locating that data entry point. If this is not done carefully, you can end up with a PI or co-PI names on the cover sheet with no associated email addresses, phone numbers, or other information that is important to include. To a reviewer, this looks sloppy. Do this work diligently and always print pages to ensure that they look the way you intended before submission. So this is what the cover sheet and the certification page looks like when printed. It is quite different than the information looked when inserted in various places in the Fastlane forms. So here are some other cover sheet takeaways. It's important to remember that the cover sheet is where you will enter the title of your project. Don't use the NSF name or acronym in a project title and strive for something just descriptive, innovative, meaningful. For example, teaching and learning innovations to improve success rates in manufacturing programs or bridge to nanotechnology. Don't try to be cute or demeaning, such as calling a faculty development project turning bad technician educators into good ones. Names that result in useful acronyms can be good, but do not create at the expense of clarity. Missing contact information for the PI or co-PI sends a message to reviewers that you haven't paid attention to those details. So this form, which is the project data form, provides the reader and the reviewer a quick glimpse of the discipline, the type of college submitting the proposal, 2 or 4 year, potential numbers and kinds of populations who will be impacted, and an indication of the kind of proposal in the broadest terms. Pay attention to the section on other institutions involved in the project. This can include organizations, businesses, or partner colleges and high schools. If your plan includes working with others outside of your college to achieve your objectives, this outreach and collaboration will be viewed positively by reviewers. Be thoughtful about the number of impacted people in different categories that are down here. You see, they're down at the bottom. On that, do not underreport your anticipated impact. Ask yourself this question. If a reviewer divides the amount of money being requested by the number of people you anticipate impacting, will this project look like a good investment? Give some thought to the numbers you report in this section and keep a record of your calculations in providing these numbers, as reviewers or an NSF program officer may ask for details prior to funding. So the table of contents is a freebie. Thank goodness. Fastlane automates this portion of the proposal. Keep in mind that where you input data will look a bit different from this print-ready page. Okay, Mike, let's take a little break for some questions that I'm sure some are beginning to have.
Thank you, Emery. Our first question regards the term SRO, Sponsored Research Officer. It's been used several times this morning. First thing, one of our colleagues online, Dr. Tellas, commented that it should not be the PI or the co-PI, but how does one know who the Sponsored Research Officer is at your institution? How do you know that? Do you know that answer, Emery?
You would just, your business office, those people would have that. It would be someone, or a grant advisor or administrator would be more than likely the SRO. If Ellen or Elaine wants to jump in as well.
Elaine, how about you? Sometimes a new institution doesn't always necessarily have a grants office. Elaine, how do you find your SRO?
Well, that's an internal decision, Mike. I've seen situations where the president was the SRO. I'm not sure that's the best decision, because presidents are not always readily available when you need action by someone in that role. But I have seen, chief academic officers take on that responsibility. More likely, though, it is somebody in a grants office, a grant writer, or somebody in the development office that deals with grants.
Sure.
The big thing to know about this responsibility is that whoever's in this role can speak for the college and does speak for the college in signing off on the proposal and other activities that this are entrusted this particular position. They essentially control who has access to what information in Fastlane related to the proposal. They are responsible for getting business office people, for instance, registered in Fastlane so that they can draw down the grant funds once an award is made.
Sure.
When you've got principal investigators, if somebody leaves the college, they have some responsibility for removing the access permissions for those individuals. And so it's not responsibility to be taken lightly. It needs to be somebody with some authority and somebody who is responsible and is going to pay attention to these details.
I guess a proposer needs to identify them pretty early in the process. A follow-up question from one of our attendees says, can there be more than one SRO? Suppose one is out sick or something like that. What do you think, Elaine?
Yes, you can have more than one person with that authority, and that is an excellent idea. I have heard way too many stories of people who had proposals ready to submit, and the person who had the authority to submit the final submission of that proposal could not be tracked down at the 11th hour on the last day.
Yeah.
And so if you really need a backup plan, because you just never know when somebody, might have a family emergency or be out sick, or, just something would happen, and you need somebody who can get into the system and do what needs to be done.
Sure, good comment. Another question, let me turn to Ellen House for this one. Ellen, could you tell us again about the completion of the submission? You can see a question from one of our colleagues there. Is it an automated check, or how does it work, Ellen, for completeness?
Hi, Mike. Well, Fastlane has built-in compliance checks, so it will let you know if you've not completed a required section or you haven't uploaded a document where you should. So you actually will not physically be able to submit the proposal until you've gone back. It'll throw up an alert saying that something is missing. So until you've addressed that, you won't be able to submit the proposal. Okay, so it's an automated function there. Yes. Good, thanks. Thank you, Ellen, for that response. One last question, and then we'll move on to the next session. Let me turn to you, Elaine. A question comes up on the definition of pre-college students. You can see it in the chat window there. The PAPPG doesn't seem to identify what pre-college means specifically. Elaine, do you have a comment there?
I think that the pre-college students are those that have not yet graduated from high school.
Okay.
So they could be enrolled in dual credit courses. They can be in early college, but they have not yet graduated from high school.
Well, that's easy enough. Good. Thank you. Well, colleagues, this has been good. You can see a lot of details come up in the process of completing these forms. So let's please use the chat window, and we'll have more question breaks going forward. But right now, Ellen, I want to turn over to you and tell us a bit more, starting with the project summary.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Yes, so your project summary is essentially your one-pager, if you will. It's the summary of your project, and it includes an overview and, most importantly, a statement on the intellectual merit and a statement on the broader impacts of your proposed activities. Your proposal will not be accepted if it is submitted without a project summary, or if the project summary does not address both the intellectual merit and broader impacts of your proposal. And Fastlane will prompt you to enter this information into 3 separate text boxes. And you'll see on the screen one for overview, one for intellectual merit, and one for broader impacts. You're required to submit information in all 3 text boxes, and your project summary in total should be no more than 1 page. And the total number of characters that will be accepted, totaling all 3 text boxes, is 4,600 characters. So if you prepare your project summary in Word, you can then cut and paste the appropriate pieces into the text boxes, but you will want to double check how that text is pasted over. There can sometimes be difficulty with character counts when cutting and pasting. So if you get repeated errors, you may have to resort to typing the text directly into the text boxes. Also, if you do successfully cut and paste, again, you'll want to check and proofread. Possessives, as an example, can sometimes translate into different characters. So you do want to pay close attention to the text that's being inputted into these boxes. NSF will only accept the project summary as an uploaded separate document if it contains special characters such as mathematical symbols or Greek letters. So you are going to need to work within these 3 specific text boxes. So if your proposal requires the use of special characters, you would need to check the box on the project summary screen that indicates you would upload your project summary as a supplementary document. But note, this is really not typical for ATE project summaries to have special characters, so you will be most likely working with these text boxes. So just to break down the project summary a little bit further, in terms of your overview, it should include a description of the activity that would result if the proposal were funded and a statement of the objectives and methods to be used. And it should really clearly indicate in the first few sentences the disciplinary focus of your project, the kinds of activities proposed, whether it be curriculum adaptation or professional development for educators, and the primary audience for those activities. NSF uses this information to assign proposals to panels for review. So you'll need to get right to the point of your grant and explain your proposal's objectives and what you will do to achieve those objectives. And as a general rule, you don't want to use this space for building a rationale for your project to describe your college or community environment or state the amount of money you're requesting. It should really be a concise overview. You can consider it an elevator speech. So if this is all someone reads about your project, they should be able to understand what it is you're trying to do and your desired outcomes. And in terms of intellectual merit and broader impact, you do want to be sure you understand what NSF means by those terms by studying the criteria provided in the RFP and in the PA-PPG. You do not have to address all the criteria listed by NSF, but you should plan to align with at least some of what has been provided to prospective grantees. So the intellectual merit, you should describe the potential of your proposed activities to advance knowledge. For broader impacts, you should describe the potential of the proposed activities to benefit society. And again, the PA-PPG and the ATE request for proposals talk about this criteria and examples of questions that you can address in your proposals. For example, under intellectual merit, does the project have the potential for improving student learning in science and engineering technician education programs? Are the goals, objectives, and outcomes and procedures and plans for achieving them worthwhile, well-developed, realistic? Under broader impacts, has an assessment of workforce needs for technicians been conducted? Does the project work with technicians or with employers to address their current and future need for technicians? So you can see there are several questions that are outlined under these merit review criteria that you'll want to address in your proposal. So really be sure to pay close attention to these when crafting your intellectual merit and broader impact statements. So moving from the project summary, we go into the project description, and this is really the heart of your proposal. This is where you should provide a clear statement of the work and activities you are undertaking. It should address what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you plan to do it, how you'll know if you're successful, and what benefits and impacts will result from a successful project. So that means you'll need to include information on the project's motivating rationale, goals, objectives, deliverables, and activities, as well as incorporate a timetable, a management plan, talk about the roles and responsibilities of the PIs, co-PIs, and other senior personnel, include a plan for sustainability, an evaluation plan, and a dissemination plan, all in 15 pages. And again, you'll want to pay close attention to addressing intellectual merit and broader impacts review criteria, as I just talked about. And you'll also have to specifically include a section in the project description, one in the narrative itself, one labeled broader impacts and one labeled intellectual merit, where you address those components in your proposed work. On the screen here is the actual form in Fastlane for project descriptions, because you'll be uploading this 15-page document either as a PDF or as a variety of word processor files, and Fastlane will convert it into PDF. You will want to double check your upload once it's in Fastlane to make sure there were no conversion issues. In terms of takeaways, there's a few tips in preparing your project description. These may seem like no-brainers, but they're actually pretty critical to the success of your proposal. You'll want to pay attention to font size and layout of your document. The length of the project description must fit into 15 pages with 1-inch margins on all sides. So again, once it's uploaded, it's a good idea to check that you don't exceed that amount. While the PAPPG allows for a minimum font of 10-point in specific fonts such as Arial and Courier New, Mentor Connect recommends you use an 11 or 12-point standard font to ensure readability. You'll want to use section headers, bullets, or charts to ensure a clear proposal and readability, and note that any visuals you use still must be included in this 15-page limitation. And do keep in mind that reviewers may be reading up to 12 proposals, and you may be the last one they're reading late at night. So proposals that have been submitted using the minimum font size, those that have a poor layout or don't clearly address topics in the solicitation, those won't encourage a good rating. As another point on formatting, do not use automated endnotes. Automated endnotes, you can number your references and then list them in a separate references section, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. There's actually a separate section for you to upload your references. And references, since it's in a separate section, don't count towards your 15-page limit. Do note that the project description should be self-contained and not include URLs that would ask reviewers to leave the description to view an external site. Reviewers are under no obligation to view those sites. The information on those sites could circumvent page limitations, and the sites could be altered or gone between submission and review. So you want to think of your project description as a self-contained document. And again, make sure to follow grant guidelines for what the project description should address. Your project description must begin with results from prior NSF support. You'll want to include a section that says results from prior NSF support. As the majority of you are new to NSF funding, this section would not be applicable, but you still need to include it. If any PI or co-PI identified on the project has received NSF funding or funding from other sources, such as the Department of Labor, and those awards pertain to the scope of work you're seeking to undertake in your new proposal, you need to provide information on results of prior support. And this subsection would include specific outcomes, results, and metrics to demonstrate the impact of those prior activities. Again, if you have no prior support, you still need to note that. You could just simply list that you have no prior results to share. However, if you are involved in the Mentor Connect project, we encourage you to write that while you have no prior results to share, you were a part of the Mentor Connect cohort. That just helps reviewers and helps NSF to identify those that were working with Mentor Connect in submitting their proposal. Biographical sketches. So biosketches are required for each individual on a proposal identified as senior personnel, including PIs and co-PIs. And biosketches should be uploaded as single PDFs or another NSF-approved templates for each individual listed as senior personnel. NSF requires a very specific format for biosketches. So again, you can consult the PAPPG. And it's a good idea to create a template for those biosketches if asking senior personnel to complete them so they can put their information into the required format. And Mentor Connect has examples of biosketches in its resources for your reference as well. You'll want to complete these as soon as possible. This is something you can get completed and uploaded into Fastlane while you continue to work on other parts of your proposal. To talk about the components that are involved in biosketches, you must include these components. You do not want to include any personal contact information, so that should not be a part of this, but you would want to list professional preparation, so the name of any undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral institutions if applicable, and include the location of the institution, major degrees, and year. Appointments listed in reverse chronological order of all the individual's academic and professional appointments beginning with current employment. Products or publications, a list of 5 products that most closely relate to the proposed project that are citable, such as publications, data sets, software, and you would include full citation information. And if your product section only includes publications, you can change the heading from products to publications. And if you do not have products or publications, that is okay, as this Biosketch format has been created to also serve the needs of the research community applying for NSF funding. So it's okay if you don't have something to list in this section. And you would also want to include synergistic activities. This is a list of up to 5 activities that demonstrate the broader impact of the individual's professional or scholarly activities as it relates to the program activities being suggested by the proposal. So this is the place to demonstrate skills, assets that the individual holds. And some examples of things to include in this category might be innovations in teaching and training, the development of curricular materials, broadening the participation of groups underrepresented in STEM, or if you worked as a subrecipient of an ATE Center grant or working with other ATE projects as primary partners, as some examples to include here. And now I will turn it over to Elaine to talk about the current and pending support form.
Thank you, Ellen. NSF wants personnel working on grants to have dedicated time to do this work. Current and pending support forms show NSF how much of your time is committed or will be committed to funded projects. This reporting includes projects supported by all funding sources and not just NSF. The expectation is that any person working on a grant will either be paid directly by the grant for the portion of his or her time that is dedicated to grant work, or that the person will be released from a portion of his or her teaching or other workload to do grant work. When release time is used, grant funds may be used to pay replacement faculty or other personnel. A combination of these payment methods is possible. For example, a faculty member may receive release time during the academic year, but be paid directly to work on the grant in the summer when he or she may not normally be under contract to the college. Anyone serving in a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel role must have current and pending support forms included in the proposal. This includes anyone working on the grant in one of these roles who is paid by your college, even if the person is not an employee of the college. How the person is paid, as an employee or as a consultant, is not important. The person's leadership role in the grant triggers the requirement for current and pending support forms. It is important to know that what NSF means by current and pending. Current refers to grants already awarded, not the one you're currently preparing. The pending proposal is the one that either hasn't been submitted or a proposal that's been submitted but for which a funding decision is not yet known. The proposal you have in progress now for October submission is a pending grant. Now let's talk about how many of these current and pending support forms you will need to prepare. For each person, there must be a current and pending support form for each proposed or ongoing project for which the person has a time commitment, including the proposal you're preparing. This means that every person included in your proposal, in a PI, co-PI, or senior personnel role will have at least one current and pending support form, even if this is your first NSF ATE proposal. The Proposal and Awards Policies and Procedures Guide, the PAPPG, tells us that current and pending support forms must include all current project support from whatever source. The PAPPG cites as examples federal, state, local, or foreign government agencies, public or private foundations, industrial or other commercial organizations. Please note that the PAPPG also states that the proposed project and all other projects or activities requiring a portion of time of the PI and other senior personnel must be included, even if the person will receive no salary support from the project. If this is your first grant, you may have only one current and pending support form for each person serving in a principal investigator or other senior personnel role. However, check to make sure that these individuals are not working on other funded projects, such as a Department of Labor grant, state-funded grant, or foundation-funded grant that will also need to be reported. Now, let's talk about the information that you will need to supply on the current and pending support forms. There is a template in Fastlane for preparing current and pending support forms. This is what the template looks like in Fastlane. The process goes more quickly if you collect all the information you will need prior to completing the form. I will walk you through each line for which you will be supplying information. Also, check and double-check prior to proposal submission to make sure that the information you submit in the current and pending support form is consistent with information you provide elsewhere in the proposal. The budget, for example, is one place where you will indicate the time commitment of personnel. NSF staff will check to make sure that the time commitment is consistent and done correctly. You will need to supply the following information for each project and person for whom a form is completed. The project proposal and title, which is pretty self-explanatory. The source of support. This is asking who is currently funding or who is being asked to fund the project. Typical sources include the NSF, Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Education, a state such as California, or a foundation such as the Lumina Foundation. The project location will be your institution's location or the location of another organization if someone on your team is working on a funded project not based at your college. It should be the institution where the grant was awarded. The total award amount is what you have either already been awarded or are requesting with the current proposal submission. The start date will be the actual start date for an already funded grant or the anticipated or requested start date for your proposed project. The end date should be the assigned or anticipated end date of the project. The support type is where you indicate whether it is current or pending. And then you indicate person months per year committed to the project. This is where the majority of mistakes get made. For this reason, I will be providing a couple of examples to re-emphasize some points. The way NSF requires you to report a person's time commitment to a project is in person months per year. As you can see in the note at the bottom of this page, you are not being asked the time span of the grant work, but rather how much of a person's time within the time span that the person will work on the project. This time commitment will need to be translated into person months. Person months must be reported with only one decimal place, so you may need to round off your calculated numbers when reporting. There are 3 options organized into 2 categories for reporting time. Person months are to be reported in one category or the other, never in both. The first category is calendar. This category is typically used for 12-month staff who work on the project, usually year-round. Person months reported in this category are most often associated with salaried personnel who work a percentage of time, such as 10% or 30%, throughout the 12-month calendar year. The second category includes academic and summer. This category should be used for faculty. Faculty typically work on academic year contracts. Some faculty also work during the summer on summer contract. The academic and summer boxes are provided to report this time in person months. To determine person months for faculty requires some calculation unless the person is being supported 100% by the grant, which is rare. Since this reporting of person months on current and pending support forms and on budget forms is very often done incorrectly, let's go through a couple of examples. In the first example, we have a 12-month employee who dedicates 10% of his or her time to grant work. The number you should put in the current and pending support form is 1.2 calendar months, which is 10% of 12 months. You report time in months and use only one decimal place. If you've made an entry in the calendar box, leave the other two boxes blank. Fight the urge to put numbers in all three boxes. Next, consider
Elaine,
a
it's
faculty
Mike.
member.
May I interrupt for a second? There was a question about whether we're on the correct sequence of slides. Several people thought we might have got off sequence there. Right now I'm looking at time commitment scenario number 2. That's what we're seeing on the screen. Is that correct?
Okay, so we talked about the, thanks for that, I apologize.
Sure.
So this slide is showing the staff member who is devoting 10% of his or her time to the project. So they are going to devote 1.2 calendar months over that 12-month period of time, and you put it in the calendar month slot where the red arrow is.
Right.
So now this next slide is for an academic contract. You have a faculty member with one course release time for fall and spring. Their normal full-time teaching load is 5 courses in this example. So they're being released for 1/5 or 20% of 9 months, which is 1.8 academic months. So you would put 1.8 in that academic box.
Right.
Now, if that faculty member also works a half a month in the summer, a total of a half a month, then they're working 0.5 of a summer month. And that would go in the summer box.
Correct. Thanks for those clarifications.
Yeah. So just back to this picture one more time. You've got, let me see if I can find my little green arrow. Let's see if this is working. Yes, yay. So if you put a number in the academic, in the academic box, you can also put a number in the summer box if it's applicable. But if you're putting them in this box, then this very first one, which says calendar, you must leave blank. Conversely, if you put a number in the calendar box, then these other two, the academic and summer boxes, should be left blank. So I hope that's a little clearer. There's just this big urge to put something in every blank, every blank box, fill it in. But that just causes great confusion and will not be correct.
Okay, thank you, Elaine.
Mm-hmm. So once you've figured all this out and calculated it and filled in your boxes, you will end up with a completed current and pending support forms in Fastlane. It produces forms that look like this example. In this case, it's a little bit small and you may not be able to read it in this format. I might mention at this point, Mike, that in addition to the webinar recording that will be available to everyone after today, we also produce a tutorial from this webinar. And the value of the tutorial, which takes the slides that we've used and takes the content that we've spoken and puts them together just in a document so that you can flip through the pages, will allow you to go back and look at any one specific thing if you want to refresh as you're putting your proposal together. So if you're doing your proposal forms and you need some help with the current and pending support forms, you can flip to that section without having to go completely through the webinar again. So we think that's going to be helpful. And in that format, these forms show up a little bit better so that you can read them. But in this particular example, I've used a Mentor Connect co-principal investigator, Dennis Faber. When this particular form was completed, he was working on the first Mentor Connect grant when the proposal for the second Mentor Connect grant was submitted. So he has one entry for a pending support and one for a current support. An individual working on multiple projects will end up with a form with several entries like this. Again, NSF will be looking to see what the totals are in terms of time commitment for an individual across all projects. So just to recap a little bit, one of the most frequent errors that are seen on current and pending support forms is mixing calendar year months with academic and/or summer months. So please just don't do it. It is important to note that although the PAPPG mentions limiting faculty time to 2 summer months, this limitation does not apply to ATE grants, as long as the time requested is considered reasonable for the scope of work described. Even so, if you plan to request more than 2 months faculty time in your proposal, you may want to contact an ATE program officer about the plan prior to finalizing your budget. Always keep in mind that personnel time on grants needs to be reasonable and aligned with the work that the person will be doing. Reviewers expect to see key personnel included in the budget with compensation for the time that they devote to grant work. Beware of having personnel donate time to grant-funded projects. Reviewers will be very skeptical and may doubt that the scope of work will be completed if the proposal does not include grant-supported personnel who have specific responsibilities for completing the scope of work. Reviewers will be looking for faculty time and budget to support that time. Also, donated time may be considered voluntary, committed cost sharing, which is prohibited. One note about faculty overloads that are so common in the community college environment. NSF will allow faculty overload pay for those working on grants as long as the workload is consistent with college policy and the policy applies to all faculty and not just those working on a grant. If faculty working on a grant will be receiving overload pay, the budget and budget justification for your proposal will need to provide specifics, and the college overload pay policy should be referenced in the budget justification. Now, Ellen, will you tell us about some more important forms?
Thank you, Elaine. Yes, I will talk about facilities, equipment, and other resources. So this form is used to describe any internal and external resources that the organization and its collaborators will provide to the project should it be funded. So it's designed to assess the adequacy of the organizational resources available to perform the proposed project. And it also provides an opportunity to explain the infrastructure, laboratories, equipment at your institution, and perhaps at partner institutions that will be available for use to support the success of your project. So keep in mind that you shouldn't use this space to describe all of the capabilities of your college, only those relevant to the proposed scope of work in your project. And the information provided on this form should be narrative in nature and not include any quantifiable financial information. The form offers the following categories for submitting information: laboratory, clinical, animal, computer, office, other, and major equipment. For ATE grants, the clinical and the animal categories are typically not applicable, and you may indicate this on the form as has been done on the screen. For laboratory support, this is often quite important for the successful implementation of an ATE grant. And if this is the case for your proposed project, you'll want to describe your current capability, even if the proposal includes some improvements or equipment additions. Under computer capability, this also can be essential for your grant, especially if the project focuses on IT, cybersecurity, or any number of other technologies that are computer dependent and will make use of computing capability in computer labs at the institution. For office support, it's also important to describe here your capabilities, since the budget guidelines specifically state that grant budgets cannot include office furnishing or everyday office equipment such as computers, copiers, and items that support normal office operations. So the personnel implementing the grant will obviously need office support to do so. So if your institution is providing dedicated office space, access to administrative support, or similar, this is a good place to make a statement about the support that's being offered. Under Other, this is a section where you can describe resources other than facilities and equipment, such as personnel support. So for example, this is a place where you can describe the talent you have assembled to serve as an internal advisory committee, or perhaps you have a college recruiter that you've lined up to support outreach activities of the grant but will not receive compensation from the grant for doing so. A third example of personnel you may want to describe in this section could be institutional research personnel who will help with internal evaluation and data collection. So in other words, if someone will be working to support the project without compensation from the grant, this is the place to describe that donated time, but don't assign monetary value to the donated time or state a specific time commitment. Major equipment, this can be an important category for some ATE grants. Advanced technology programs are often very equipment intensive, and your institution may have major equipment that will be used in implementing the grant, or you may have a partner university or industry partner working with your project that will be providing equipment for your students. So if major equipment like this is involved in the success of your project, this is the place where you can describe the availability of these resources being provided by an industry or an education partner, such as an electron microscope or access to a clean room. So moving from facilities and other resources, I had mentioned references cited, so you don't want to do automated endnotes in your proposal, but if you are citing materials in your project narrative, you need to list your source material in this references cited section and not as part of the project description. NSF expects you to do research in the process of developing your grant proposal. Like most funding sources, they encourage the use of research-based strategies and adaptation and implementation from previously funded NSF ATE or other funded projects, and your references indicate that you have investigated what others have done that has worked. You'll want to cite references that explain outcomes that led you to select a particular strategy, curriculum, or teaching methodology, or other promising or proven approach to address your challenges in technician education. And reference citations are also used to cite the sources of the data that you provided in describing your project rationale or your results of prior support. So as you include information from your research, you'll want to manually number your references throughout the project description and then prepare a separate document with citations that correspond to those numbers that you would upload here into Fastlane. And this separate section of the proposal does not count towards your 15-page project description. You will also need to submit a data management plan. This is a requirement for all ATE proposals, and you'll prepare this as a supplementary document of no more than 2 pages. This document should describe how the proposal will conform to NSF policy on the dissemination and sharing of research results. So in essence, NSF expects you to share the outcomes of your work. You're expected to share primary data, samples, and supporting materials from your grant projects. And this data management plan will be reviewed as part of the intellectual merit and broader impacts of your proposal. So your data management plan should specify the types of data and other materials and products that will be generated or collected by your project, how that data will be stored, protected, and appropriately shared, how what is generated by the project will be preserved during and beyond the project, and how others will be able to access these project products. On the screen is a sample data management plan that was prepared for a small grant for institutions new to ATE proposal. Mentor Connect has sample proposals with sample data management plans available in the online resource collection. And NSF also provides a detailed frequently asked questions page with questions on data management plans, and the URL is provided on the slide to that. Also wanted to cover other supplemental materials, and note this is not an appendix. You don't get an opportunity to upload additional materials, only those that are required by NSF. So required supplemental documents include the data management plan, which I just discussed, which has its own place to upload. And in addition to that, under supplemental materials, you would need to upload a list of all known people, aside from your participants and your students, who will receive compensation from the project and their affiliation. So that list of all people receiving compensation from the project, and some of these people may not be from your college. And so this is an area to look for consistency. This list needs to be consistent with the budget and budget justification you submit in you submit and with your project description and in your current and pending support forms. So in other words, you don't want to have someone listed in this supplemental document that's receiving compensation from the grant whose function hasn't been addressed in the project description and in the budget. Letters of commitment. This is an area where the PAPPG and the ATE program solicitation differ, and you always defer to the ATE program solicitation. That will always trump the PAPPG. The PAPPG has a very specific format for where partners would indicate support, but the ATE program solicitation is asking for letters of commitment, and the key word there is commitment. Reviewers want to see documentation of the commitments described in the proposal by your partners, so you'd want to include a letter from industry pledging resources or time to the project. They should outline specific collaborations, partnerships, or resources pledged, and again, not merely be letters of support. So letters that just endorse the project or offer non-specific support should not be included. Your proposal could be returned to you without review. If you just say that these partners say, we think this is a great proposal, they need to actually outline how they are committed and invested in the project's success. And you do want to be aware of boilerplate and templates for letters, so reviewers do notice if you have a solid proposal but 5 identical letters of commitment. However, an alternative to that is if, say, you have an industry advisory meeting and you're able to write a letter of commitment and have all partners sign the one letter, sign off on that as a collaborative effort, that's something that's acceptable to do and bears a lot of weight. So that covers letters of commitment, and then also an ATE program solicitation requirement. If you name your external evaluator in your project description, you need to upload a biosketch for that evaluator as part of your supplemental documentation. So that would follow the same biosketch template. It would just be uploaded as a supplemental doc. And single copy documents. So you need to submit a collaborators and other affiliations form, and this is for each person listed as senior personnel on your project. So NSF actually provides a template for this. It's available on their website. So you would download that template, you would input the information, which includes a listing of the name and affiliation of individuals identified as senior personnel, their affiliations as of the last 12 months, and any collaborators on projects such as funded grants, research, paper collaborations that they've conducted in the last 48 months. So the template is fillable. However, the content and format requirements should not be altered by the user, so only fill it out. Don't change any of the headers or anything else, as that will cause errors and impact how it's viewed when it's submitted. And the template must be saved in the XLSX format and directly uploaded into Fastlane, where it indicates collaborators and under affiliations under a single copy document. And then Fastlane will convert it to PDF. So again, the URL on this page takes you to the page to download this template and again provides these detailed instructions. And this document is used by NSF primarily to determine review panels for the proposals. So again, that's the single copy document, is filling out that template and not altering it and then uploading it into Fastlane. And finally, just a little bit of advice. Obviously, start early. We're starting early with you as we realize this is quite a process, and review what you've written several times. Ask others to review it. A lot of times those coming cold to your proposal may notice gaps or inconsistencies that you won't see since you've been working on it so closely. And don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what we're here for. As Elaine mentioned, this will come out in a tutorial, in a recording, but you have your mentors, you have Mentor Connect staff. We have an online resource library which has samples of these documents, and chances are if somebody's come up against a challenge or a question, we've addressed it. So we're happy to entertain questions and help you complete these forms. And with that, I will turn to a question break.
Thanks, Ellen. I'll start with you. It's on those supplementary documents. 2 questions. One is, does the evaluation plan go in those supplementary documents?
No, the evaluation plan should actually be part of your project description. So part of that 15-page narrative is where your evaluation plan needs to be placed.
I mean, if you run out of space and your evaluator gives you a big plan, can you submit it, or what do you think?
Unfortunately, no, you cannot submit it. You're not allowed to submit an appendix. It's only the required supplemental document. So you'll need to condense that evaluation plan to fit within the project description.
Okay. Okay, thanks. A question, I'll start with you, but I think Elaine might know this answer too. But let's start with you, Ellen. Since we're talking about evaluators, is there such a thing as a list of NSF-approved evaluators?
You know, there's not a list of NSF-approved evaluators. That's not something NSF puts out. Certainly, ATE Central has a list of those that have been used as evaluators.
Right.
For NSF ATE, and evaluate the Resource Center for Evaluation for the ATE program may also have suggestions, but there's not an official NSF list. There's more an anecdotal listing of those that have worked as evaluators.
Okay, thanks. Ellen, let me now turn to Elaine. Elaine, it wouldn't surprise you that there's questions regarding that faculty allocation of time, right? It always comes up, and I know that you often get these questions, but here's a couple. What if a faculty member works part-time for each of those 2 summer months? How do you allocate that?
Mike, you just you figure out how much that time is relative to the month. You know, if there are 20 work days in that month, then this faculty member is going to work 5 of those work days. Or if they're, you know, you've got 2 months, that would be, you know, maybe 40 work days, and they're going to work 10 days total. Then that would be, you know, 10/40ths, or,
right.
You know, calculated as the number of person months. So that's why I mentioned earlier that calculations are usually involved when you're talking about faculty time, because you just have to, I realize that the decimals don't always work out cleanly. You may calculate it and find out that somebody's working, you know, 2.785 person months. Well, you can't put 2.785 person months in these forms. And so you tend to round them off. But when you do that, look at the overall picture, because that's really what's going to be important, is to look at the kind of the total time commitment that somebody's got to this project. If the time amounts are relatively small, you may want to round up. In other words, like if it's, you know, 1.48, you know, to 1.5, or if it's 1.6 and you have to use a single digit, you might want to use 2. Sure. So there's going to be some rounding, and it's not an exact science. It's just, you know, they just want to see, you know, as closely as can be approximated how much time this person is going to be committing, and it'll be tied to some sort of dollar compensation. So you really want the two to support one another.
Sure, that makes sense. Good, thanks, Elaine. Let's wind back to another question, and it has to do with where you're talking about results of prior support. Now, it's just for the personnel involved, or is it for the entire college, right? Is it just the PI, co-PI, and other senior personnel, or is it for broader members of the college?
Well, generally it's for the people involved.
Yes.
However, there are circumstances where there has been a grant. Like a good example would be the Department of Labor TAC grants. And it may be that those TAC grants allowed a college to develop some capacity in terms of equipment, or maybe even some curricula has been developed that is forming a foundation for whatever the scope of work is for the ATE project. And when it's tied closely to what you're going to do with your new project, and it shows a reviewer that you have done something substantial with prior support around this topic or in this area, then putting a little bit about that in your results of prior support is not a bad idea. What you don't want to do is spend a lot of your real estate, as we call it. Those 15 pages are precious, and you've got to be very judicious about how you use them. You don't want to take a results of prior support section and talk about every grant the college has, including those that have nothing to do with what it is you're proposing with the ATE proposal. It's
Okay,
not
good.
a place. It's not a place to demonstrate that your college has had, 15 grants over the last 10 years in all sorts of areas. There are some financial reviews of the college that will establish for NSF that you've got the capacity and the systems in place to be a grantee and to be responsible with these federal funds if they are awarded. So there are other mechanisms for checking those things out. You don't need to use your results of prior support to try to establish that your college is a responsible potential grantee.
Sure.
This has to do with really the content of the proposal that you're proposing and the experience of the people who are working on it, are going to be working on it.
Okay, good. Let's continue playing Stump the Panelists and turn back to Ellen. Ellen, here's a question. You can see it in the chat. It has to do, you mentioned that those letters should not be what one of our colleagues sometimes refers to as love letters, but they should be commitment. But what if the words support and commitment are used in that same letter? Do you think that would play okay?
That would play fine. It's certainly fine to say that the partner supports the project, but what NSF is looking for is actual commitment. So a letter that just says, this is a great idea, we support it, doesn't indicate any level of commitment. Certainly writing support is wonderful, but what we're looking for is actual levels of commitment. So pledging in-kind resources or equipment to the grant, pledging personnel, pledging to provide internships for students. So, to disseminate, help to be a dissemination partner and get the word out about the program. So concrete examples of how the partner will commit to the project as well as support it.
Good response. Next question. I think it was Elaine that mentioned this, but as long as I've got you on the hook, Ellen, I'll try you first. To get copies of prior work or prior proposals that may have been funded, is there a mechanism that you could request them? Is there a list somewhere? How would that work? I know Elaine mentioned that there are some copies of proposals available, but what if is there a list of awards and a list of how you get these proposals? How might that work?
Well, the proposals we were referring to on this webinar are proposals that are in the Mentor Connect resource library.
Yes.
So those are available online. Past participants have sanitized and shared their proposals with us for the purposes of education. NSF Online has abstracts of awards that have been made. They do not share proposals, but you can see what has been funded in a program and in an area, and we suggest that you look through the awards database so you can obtain abstracts and see what's been funded within ATE within your discipline area. But that's what we're referring to in terms of obtaining a proposal is what has been submitted to Mentor Connect for the purposes of helping others develop proposals. And so we have some samples of those in our database.
I guess there are mechanisms of requesting things through Freedom of Information, but in my experience,
that's often a very long process.
That's a long haul. Yes.
Yeah, highly effective.
Right.
Well,
highly effective
Mike also.
Barrier. Yeah. Go ahead, Elaine.
Often, if you reach out to the principal investigator of a project and ask, they will share proposals with you. I would suggest, being judicious about this. Don't just send out a blanket request to dozens of principal investigators, but show that you've actually done your research, you've read their project abstract online. You explain to the principal investigator's email address will be in the NSF database, so you can contact the principal investigator of any funded project, tell them what you're working on, why their project is of interest to you, and ask if they would be willing to share. Going to NSF and making that request is sort of a last recourse, and you do need to allow for a very long lead time if you do that to get it that way. But the AT program is a very sharing community, and a principal investigator will be willing to talk to you about their project and possibly even share a copy of a proposal or parts of one with you.
You know, Elaine, in
One
my
other
case,
comment,
yeah, you go ahead.
Mike, I'd
Elaine,
like to make while
Sure.
we're on that topic, though, is just a word of caution. We do have proposals in the Mentor Connect database that you can look at. These are small, new to ATE projects. The solicitation for the program changes over time. And for instance, a little over a year ago, the amount of the small grants awards was increased to $300,000. So if you find a project that's $200,000 or less in our repository, be sure you check the dates. They may be for, older proposals, and they might have been responding to a different solicitation. So be very careful when you do look at proposals that were submitted and funded in earlier years, because you can't just go by that, because some things in the program may have changed between then and now. So you want to make sure that you're responsive to the most current solicitation.
That makes sense. Thank you. We're going to take one more question here, and then we're going to wrap up in the interest of time. It's a small comment, but I'll go back to you, Ellen. You mentioned that summary page, remember the one that has the 3 boxes that you fill in, that's a sort of standalone, because you're facing that potentially tired reviewer and you want him to get a good sense of your proposal. Here's the question. Can you put any graphics or tables in that, or is that just a text field?
That is just a text field. There should be no graphics or tables in your project summary. That really should be 3 concise statements: your overview, your intellectual merit, and your broader impacts, and really serve as a very succinct elevator speech, if you will, about your project.
I think they really look at that first. I often think reviewers first turn to that page, don't they?
Yes.
Good.
And
Thanks for your comments.
If your summary does not match what you're proposing to do.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to click forward here. We're going to turn back to Emily, and tell us, Emily, a little bit more about all the project resources you've got for grant development.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I am sure that everyone now is very overloaded, but the Mentor Connect project is here to come to your rescue. The Mentor Connect project offers a resource library, which Ellen has put up there in the chat window as well, that specifically provides these solutions to your grant proposal writing needs for the ATE program. And other AT resources that may be helpful in your proposal preparation include the Compendium of Research on Technician Education, which is found on the teachingtechnicians.org website, and the resources to guide your project evaluation at evaluate.org, which I believe Ellen put up there as well. And links to the ATE projects and centers, curriculum, and other resources are also available at ATE Central as well. So there are a lot of different resources for you all to use. On this, we would love for you to connect with Mentor Connect. We have a number of ways by which you can do this. You can send us an email or visit us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter or even check out our YouTube channel. We welcome any questions or any follow-up that you may have. And most importantly, we encourage you to go to our website. We are in the process of revamping that. That will be going up probably in the next 30 to 60 days. But this webinar and the PowerPoint slides, like Mike had said before, will also be available following the broadcast and are archived on the Mentor Connect website for later viewing. And there's also going to be a tutorial, which I think Elaine also mentioned, based on today's content, which kind of helps you go through the PowerPoint slides and enables you to review one or more of the multiple forms that we've described with that. So with that being said, I want to thank you for your participation, and we look forward to hearing from you and supporting your efforts as you continue towards the submission of your NSF ATE grant proposals. We are great cheerleaders for you, so I want to thank Ellen and Elaine, and I want to thank Mike and Luca Partners for the conducting this webinar and leading this webinar. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit about some of our evaluation, which is very important for us to hear from you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Emery, and your colleagues, Elaine and Ellen, for their presentation today. Now, folks online, what I'm going to do now is launch the survey. It's just a few questions, but it really helps improve what we're doing, helps us show our impact to our funder, the National Science Foundation. This survey most likely will open in a new browser window. You'll still be able to hear me talking while you're completing the survey. If it doesn't open for you, I'm going to place the link to the survey in the chat window. I'll do that now. And remember, presenters, please don't close this window or take the survey. So there it is. You have two options. You can click on the link in the chat, or if your computer and browser has opened a new window, you can complete it then. I'll leave this survey open for the next few minutes. But officially that ends our webinar today. And Ellen, Elaine, and Emery, you know what I learned today? It wasn't just about forms, but I got a lot of hints on strategies to preparing effective proposals, ways of doing things, which I think can increase the competitiveness of proposals. So Elaine, thank you very much for all of those tips. We appreciate it. Ellen, thank you again for your participation, and Emery. Colleagues, that officially ends the audio portion of our webinar today. I'm going to turn off the recording. We'll leave that evaluation up for a few minutes, and we'll see you for the next Mentor Connect webinar. Goodbye.